All right, so we're diving into some pretty diverse stuff today. We've got a research paper on machine learning, a self-help book about financial freedom, some architectural guidelines, and oh yeah, a few random internet snippets that just might tie everything together.
Sounds like quite the mix.
Ready to see what connections we can uncover?
Always up for a good mental stretch. Let's see.
Okay, let's kick things off with this paper, The Underlying Values of Machine Learning Research. It really gets into the nitty-gritty of what drives the field.
Yeah. The authors did this really deep analysis of a bunch of influential machine learning papers.
Hmm.
And they found something kind of surprising. A lot of these papers were all about achieving like state-of-the-art performance, pushing the technical boundaries, but they rarely even touched on the real-world implications of their work.
So it's like they're so focused on getting a perfect score on a practice test that they don't even know if the test is actually relevant to the real exam.
Exactly. It's like you could ace that practice test, but still be totally unprepared for the real thing.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that really got me thinking. Even at seemingly neutral values like accuracy can actually be influenced by societal biases.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, think about it. To measure accuracy, you need to define what the true labels are. And those labels are often determined by human judgment, which, can be pretty subjective. And it can reflect existing power dynamics in society.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So even if a machine learning model achieves high accuracy, it might still perpetuate biases that are already present in the data it was trained on.
Exactly. Like take facial recognition systems, for example. If they're mainly trained on images of white males, they might be less accurate at recognizing people of color or women. And that can have serious real-world consequences.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a huge issue, especially with how much we're relying on AI these days. So it seems like maybe we need to rethink how we define success in machine learning. It can't just be about achieving high performance on some benchmark data set. We also need to make sure these systems align with our values and actually benefit society as a whole.
Absolutely. It's a conversation we definitely need to be having as we keep developing and deploying these powerful technologies.
Right on. Okay, that was a lot to digest about machine learning. How about we switch gears for a bit and talk about something a little more, I don't know, down to earth, personal finance.
Sure. Sounds good.
So we've got Bob Lodish's book, Simple Money, Rich Life, which presents this four-part formula for achieving financial freedom.
I'm curious about this one. What kind of approach does it take?
It's pretty cool, actually. It goes beyond just the typical saving and investing advice. It
Yep.
really brings in this element of personal values and ethics.
Well, that's interesting. So it's not just about the numbers. It's about aligning your financial choices with your overall life goals.
Yeah, exactly. Like, one thing that really stood out to me was the focus on AUM, which stands for Assets Under Management. It's about building long-term wealth, not just chasing a bigger paycheck.
I like that. It shifts the focus from income to actual wealth accumulation.
Right. And it got me thinking about how we define financial success. Is it just about how much money you make, or is it about something more holistic?
Yeah, that's a good question. What does this book's approach tell us about the author's values around money and life?
Well, the book definitely emphasizes generosity and being responsible with your resources. It's not just about accumulating wealth for yourself. It's about using your resources to make a positive impact.
I can get behind that. It's like that old saying, it's not about how much you have, it's about what you do with it.
That's a good one. Okay, let's see what other unexpected connections we can find in this pile of source material. Now, for something completely different, we have these architectural guidelines from the Utah Department of Transportation.
Architectural guidelines from the Department of Transportation.
Right.
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
I know, right? You're probably wondering what transportation has to do with architecture. But trust me, this is where it gets really interesting.
All right, you've got my attention. Lay it on me.
So these guidelines aren't actually about building roads or bridges or anything like that. They're about evaluating the historical significance of residential properties built after 1940, which is kind of important for transportation planning, believe it or not.
Okay, I'm going to bite. Why would the Utah DOT be interested in the history of houses?
Well, when they're planning new transportation projects, they have to consider the potential impact on historic properties, right? So these guidelines help them figure out if a property or a whole neighborhood has historical significance that needs to be preserved or protected.
That makes sense. So they're not just plowing through history, they're actually trying to be mindful of the historical context of the areas they're working in.
Exactly. And it's not just about whether a building is old. They look at all sorts of things to determine its historical significance, like the location, the design, the materials, the workmanship, even the feeling of the place.
The feeling. How do you even measure that?
Well, I guess it's about trying to understand the story the building tells, how it reflects the time period it was built in and the people who lived there. It's like being a historical detective.
I like that analogy. So they're not just looking at bricks and mortar. They're trying to piece together the history of a place through its architecture.
Exactly. And one of the key concepts in these guidelines is integrity. But it's not just about whether the building is in good condition, it's also about whether it's been altered in ways that affect its historical character. Like even something as simple as adding siding or painting over brick can change the integrity of a historic property.
Huh. I never thought about it that way. I guess even small changes can affect how we understand a building's history.
Right. It makes you realize that even seemingly ordinary houses can hold a piece of history.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just something in textbooks. It's all around us, even in the places we live.
So I'm curious, have you ever thought about your own home's architectural integrity? Would the original builder recognize it today?
Now that you mention it, I'm not so sure. I've definitely made some changes over the years. Added a deck, painted the front door, that kind of thing. I guess I never really considered how those changes might affect the historical character of the house.
Yeah, it's something to think about. Okay, moving on from houses, our source material also included some pretty interesting snippets about the power of music, which seems like a bit of a jump from architecture and machine learning. But hey, maybe there's a connection there waiting to be uncovered.
A connection between music and
Yeah.
everything else we've been talking about.
Yeah.
All right, I'm game. Let's hear it.
Well, there's this quote by Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, that really caught my eye. He said, if you learn music, you'll learn most all there is to know. Pretty bold statement, right?
Definitely makes you stop and think.
Huh.
What do you make of it? Was he being literal or just waxing poetic?
I'm not sure, but it's intriguing, isn't it? Like, what if there's something about music that unlocks a deeper understanding of the universe?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, music is fundamentally based on patterns and mathematical relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those same principles pop up in so many areas of knowledge, from physics to biology to, well, even artificial intelligence.
Some researchers are actually exploring connections between music theory and mathematical concepts that are relevant to AI. Maybe there's more to that Case quote than meets the eye.
Now, that's a rabbit hole I'm willing to go down. It's like music is a hidden language of the universe, and if we can learn to speak it, who knows what secrets we might unlock.
And here's another layer to add to this musical mystery. Our source material also mentioned this recurring number sequence, 142857. Apparently, it has all these fascinating mathematical properties that some people believe have deep significance.
A numerical puzzle. All right, you've got my attention.
Mm.
What's so special about this sequence?
Well, I don't want to spoil all the fun just yet. Maybe our listeners can do some research and see what they discover. But I will say this. It's related to the decimal expansion of a very specific fraction, and it creates these mind-bending cyclical patterns that are just begging to be explored.
Consider me officially intrigued.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look into that. I always love a good mathematical mystery.
Me too. All right, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into these connections and see what other surprises we can uncover.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's really remarkable how these seemingly random threads we're exploring keep connecting in unexpected ways.
It is, isn't it? Like, remember that machine learning paper we were discussing?
Yeah.
And how even something as seemingly objective as accuracy can actually be shaped by societal biases.
Oh yeah, that was a real eye-opener. And it gets even more concerning when you look at some real-world examples. Did you know that facial recognition systems, which are often trained on data sets that are mostly white and male, can have a really hard time accurately identifying people of color and women?
Yeah, that's a pretty serious problem, especially considering how widespread facial recognition technology is becoming. Like, it's being used in everything from security systems to law enforcement.
Exactly. The potential consequences are huge. And it's not just facial recognition. Either algorithms are being used in hiring, loan applications, even in the criminal justice system. And if those algorithms are trained on biased data, they can actually perpetuate existing inequalities.
It really makes you think twice about just blindly trusting these algorithms, doesn't it? Like, we need to understand that they're not some kind of neutral, objective force. There are human choices and potential biases baked into these systems.
Absolutely. We can't just assume that technology is inherently fair or unbiased. It reflects the values and assumptions of the people who create it.
Which brings us to an interesting contrast with that personal finance book we talked about, Simple Money, Rich Life. It seems to advocate for a much more intentional and values-driven approach to decision-making, but in the realm of personal finance.
It's true. That book really emphasizes aligning your financial choices with your values. Instead of just blindly chasing the highest return on investment, it encourages you to consider the ethical implications of your financial decisions.
Yeah, and one of the core values that the book highlights is generosity. It's not just an afterthought either. It's woven right into that four-part formula they present. Save, earn, give, enjoy.
It's true. Giving is right up there with the more practical steps of saving and earning, which is pretty interesting. It suggests that maybe true financial freedom isn't just about accumulating wealth for yourself, but also about using your resources to make a positive impact.
And you know what else struck me about that formula? The fact that giving comes before enjoying. It's like the author is saying that true enjoyment comes from a sense of purpose and contribution, not just from spending money on ourselves.
That's a really thought-provoking point. Maybe true fulfillment comes from aligning our actions with our values and contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, what if there's a connection here with that Edgar Cayce quote about music? If you learn music, you'll learn most all there is to know. What if learning music not only helps us understand those technical and mathematical patterns we were talking about, but also attunes us to those deeper values of harmony, balance, and connection?
I like where you're going with this. Maybe music transcends that purely technical realm and taps into something deeper, something more universal.
And if music can do that, maybe other seemingly unrelated areas of knowledge can too. Speaking of which, those UDOT architectural guidelines we were discussing kind of unexpectedly highlighted that idea of interconnectedness as well.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, remember how they evaluate a property's integrity based not just on its physical condition, but also on its setting, association, and even its feeling? It made me realize that even a single building is part of this larger network of relationships. Like, it's connected to the people who live there, the community it's a part of, the historical events it's witnessed.
It's true. We tend to think of buildings as these static objects, but they're actually embedded in a web of relationships and stories.
Right. Maybe that's one of the key takeaways from this whole deep dive, actually. Whether we're talking about machine learning, personal finance, architecture, or even music, it seems like this theme of interconnectedness just keeps popping up.
Yeah, our world is this incredibly complex system full of interconnected parts, and I think understanding those connections is key to making sense of it all.
Well said. Okay, I think we've kept our listeners in suspense long enough. Let's finally dive into that numerical mystery you mentioned earlier, the 142857 sequence. Tell us, what's so special about it?
All right. Remember how I said it was connected to the decimal expansion of a particular fraction? Well, that fraction is 1/7.
1/7. Really? Wouldn't have guessed that.
I know, right? Seems pretty simple.
Uh,
But here's where it gets weird. When you divide 1 by 7, you get this decimal that repeats infinitely. 0.142857142857, and so on. And that 6-digit sequence, 142857, has some really bizarre properties.
Okay, now you've got to give us an example.
So check this out. If you multiply 142857 by 2, you get 285742.
Wait a minute, it's the same 6 digits, just shifted over.
Exactly. And it gets even weirder. Multiply it by 3 and you get 428571. Multiply by 4, you get 571428. It just keeps cycling through those same 6 digits.
No way. That's amazing. It's like some kind of hidden code embedded in math.
It really is. And some people believe this sequence points to some deeper order and harmony underlying the universe. Like it's this cyclical pattern that reflects something fundamental about the nature of reality itself.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing.
Speaking of things that are part of a larger whole, we have one more source we haven't talked about yet. Those UDOT guidelines also mention evaluating entire subdivisions, not just individual properties.
Oh, right. That adds another dimension to our discussion about historical integrity, doesn't it?
Yeah, like what's the significance of looking at an entire subdivision as opposed to just a single house?
Well, it has to do with how we define historical significance. The guidelines explain that when you're evaluating a subdivision built after 1940, you can't just focus on individual houses. You have to consider the integrity of the entire development.
So a single house might not be historically significant on its own, but it gains significance as part of a larger context. Like if it's part of a well-preserved subdivision that represents a particular architectural style or a specific period in the community's history.
Right.
Exactly. It's about understanding the historical narrative that the subdivision tells, the social and cultural forces that shaped its development. Like take the rise of suburbanization after World War II. It led to the development of these large-scale planned communities with distinct architectural styles. These subdivisions might not have individually remarkable buildings, but they're historically significant as representations of that era.
It's like how a single note in a musical composition might not be that interesting on its own, but it gains meaning and power as part of the overall melody and harmony.
You got it. It's all about understanding those individual elements as part of a larger interconnected whole.
And it seems like that theme keeps coming up no matter where we look. Whether it's algorithms, financial decisions, architecture, or music, this idea of interconnectedness just keeps popping up.
It's almost like reality itself is one giant neural network, this incredibly complex web of interconnected nodes that are constantly interacting and influencing each other.
That's a powerful image. It makes you wonder, what would happen if we could zoom out far enough? Would we see that everything, from the tiniest subatomic particles to the vast galaxies, is somehow connected, part of one grand cosmic symphony of existence?
That's a beautiful thought and a perfect note to end our second part on. I think we've given our listeners plenty to ponder.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. You know, it's really amazing how we've journeyed through so many different areas of knowledge today, from machine learning and finance to architecture and music.
It's been quite the ride, hasn't it? As we wrap things up, I keep finding myself coming back to that idea of interconnectedness, like it's this hidden thread running through all these seemingly separate topics.
You know, it strikes me that even the concept of assets under management from Simple Money, Rich Life ties into that.
No, let's say.
It's not just about managing your money as this thing separate from everything else. It's about understanding how your financial resources connect to every part of your life. Your values, your relationships, your community, your health, your well-being, everything.
It's true. True wealth is about the richness of your whole life, not just the numbers in your bank account.
And that richness comes from the connections we make, the ways we contribute, the ways we become part of something bigger than ourselves.
Right, and that reminds me of those architectural guidelines and how they emphasize the setting and the associations of a building. A house isn't just four walls and a roof. It's part of a neighborhood, a community, a whole historical story.
It gets its meaning and value from those connections, not just from the bricks and mortar.
It's like how a single neuron in the brain doesn't mean much on its own. It's the connections to other neurons that make it significant, that allow it to be part of a network that processes information and creates meaning.
And speaking of brains and patterns, I've noticed these images keep popping up in our source material. Diagrams of the brain, the DNA, double helix, that spiral of musical frequencies.
They're like metaphors, aren't they? Pointing to the interconnected nature of, well, everything.
Like how the patterns in a DNA molecule hold the blueprint for life, or how a galaxy's spiral shape is a result of the same fundamental forces that govern the whole universe.
And maybe those same patterns and forces were working in our minds too, in the way we learn and create and interact with the world.
It really makes you think. So here's a question. If we could truly grasp how interconnected everything is, would it change how we live? How we treat each other, how we treat our planet?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? What does this understanding call us to do? How do we turn knowledge into wisdom and action?
It might start with shifting our perspective, being willing to look beyond the idea that we're all separate and recognize that we depend on each other.
Maybe that's what Edgar Cayce was getting at with his quote about music. If you learn music, you'll learn most all there is to know. It's not just about the technical skill, it's about understanding the harmony and rhythm of the universe, the dance of energy and information that creates everything.
And maybe that's the key to real financial freedom too, building a life that's not just about money, but about meaning and connection.
It's about investing in what matters. Our relationships, our communities, our planet, the well-being of everyone and everything.
It's about making choices that are in line with our values and realizing that even small actions can create ripples throughout the whole web of life.
This whole deep dive has really highlighted those connections for me.
Me too. It's been an amazing journey.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
And until next time, keep exploring those connections, keep asking those questions, keep searching for the harmony that unites
Welcome
us
to our
all.
deep dive into the world of Carnage 1nOnly, this YouTube channel. It's really fascinating, not just music.
Yeah.
It's spoken word,
Right.
almost rap-like lyrics delivered with this raw energy. It really pulls you in.
Yeah, what I find really fascinating about Carnage 1nOnly is the way he combines these personal experiences and raw emotions with social commentary.
Yeah.
It's all woven together through this distinct lyrical style.
Exactly.
Like reading someone's personal journal,
Yeah.
set to music.
Yeah. Get ready to explore some pretty heavy topics.
Yeah.
Mental health,
Mm.
societal pressures, loss, and that universal search for meaning.
Right off the bat,
Yeah.
you notice these recurring themes of internal struggles and mental health. Tracks like Crossroads, Scars, Wait, and Pessimistic, exactly.
Especially Scars.
Yeah.
Where he talks about pushing people away, even when they try to get close. There's this one line that really hits hard. Just because you hold me, don't mean you feel me. I'm curious, what do you make of that? That need to keep people at arm's length.
I think, it speaks to a fear of vulnerability, maybe stemming from past hurts, almost like he's built up these walls to protect himself, even though it isolates him even further.
Right.
But then we have Pessimistic, which takes on a totally different approach.
Right.
He uses dark humor to cope with difficult emotions.
Yeah.
It's like, pessimistic like a fly, I'm attracted to bullshit.
Right.
What do you think? Is it a defense mechanism?
Oh, yeah.
Or a way to make light of these serious issues?
I think it's definitely a way of processing pain through humor.
Yeah.
But it also makes me wonder, by poking fun at negativity,
Yeah.
is he trying to find a way to rise above it?
Yeah.
It's a common theme in a lot of his work,
Absolutely.
finding meaning in this chaos.
This sense of being an outsider is another recurring theme. You hear it in tracks like Never Made It, Uncredited, and especially Playground. The lyrics paint this picture of isolation, even when you're in a place you're supposed to feel connected.
Playground is so vivid.
Yeah.
You can practically feel that sense of being pushed around, overlooked, like you just don't belong.
Right.
And musically,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how he uses this rhythmic repetition to emphasize these feelings, like in Carnage Chasing, where he repeats, I've been waiting, I've been racing, time is wasting, what am I chasing?
Yeah.
It's hypnotic.
It is.
And really emphasizes that feeling of relentless pursuit.
It's like a mantra, you know, reflecting that constant internal drive.
Yeah.
And then you have Illuminate Freestyle, where he uses these layered metaphors and internal rhymes.
Internal rhymes.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example? I love learning about lyrical techniques.
Yeah. So in Illuminate Freestyle, there's the line, I'm finding it's only in the dark where you find your silver lining, so I'm a diamond. Yeah.
Finding and lining.
Right.
That rhyme within the same line, that's internal rhyme.
Ah, I see. It creates this tighter, more intricate sound.
Exactly.
And speaking of soundscapes,
Yeah.
one thing that really gets me is the raw intensity of his vocal delivery. Even in remixed tracks like the Billie Eilish Ocean Eyes adaptation, that rawness just cuts through.
It's definitely not about polished perfection.
Yeah.
It's about raw, unfiltered emotion.
Right.
Which makes his work all the more compelling.
And then there's the social commentary.
Yeah.
Which hits hard in tracks like Coming Through. There's a real sense of pushing back against societal expectations, materialism. You know, he's literally saying, get out my way, I'm coming through, make some room.
And in Sirens, he tackles a really tough topic.
Yeah.
Suicide. He doesn't shy away from sharing statistics.
Right.
And directly addressing this issue.
Yeah. It's a brave choice to bring such a sensitive topic to light through music. Do you think it helps to break the stigma surrounding mental health? Absolutely. By addressing it head on, he's opening up a space for dialogue.
Yeah.
And challenging the silence that often surrounds these issues.
And in Never Made It,
Yeah.
he explores systemic issues like generational struggles and lack of support. What happened to our generation? There's no love in relations.
It speaks to a sense of disillusionment,
But yeah,
feeling lost within a system that feels broken.
it's a stark contrast to the deeply personal storytelling you find in tracks like Holding On. This one feels so intimate,
Yeah.
filled with vivid childhood memories,
Yeah.
and this struggle to cope with loss.
Last poem also stands out. It reads almost like a personal reflection on love, loss, and the search for meaning.
Yeah.
The line, he don't know where he's going, says there's no one to hold him, just really captures that feeling of being adrift, searching for connection. Have you ever felt that way?
Absolutely, especially after a loss or during times of transition.
Yeah.
There's that sense of needing something to anchor you.
Yeah, exactly. And Carnage 1nOnly doesn't shy away from expressing that vulnerability.
It takes a lot of courage to put those feelings out there, especially in such a public way.
It does.
What do you think drives him to be so open?
Perhaps it's a way of connecting with others who might be going through similar things. It's a reminder that we're not alone in our struggles.
Yeah.
And that sharing our stories can be a powerful form of healing.
It's like he's saying, here's my pain, my confusion, my search for something more. And by doing so, He creates a space for others to do the same.
Exactly. And that act of sharing can be incredibly liberating,
Yeah.
both for the artist and the listener.
Speaking of searching,
Yeah.
there's a recurring theme of seeking purpose and connection in tracks like Songo and Time.
Yeah.
We come alive when the sun goes. From Songo suggests finding life and meaning in unexpected places,
Yeah.
almost like embracing the darkness to find the light.
It speaks to finding resilience and hope even in the darkest of times.
Yeah.
And One Heart explores this yearning for connection,
Hmm.
with these complex relationship portraits highlighting this desire to belong
Right.
and to be understood. Have you noticed how those themes play out in One Heart?
Definitely. He portrays these relationships that are both beautiful and heartbreaking,
Yeah.
showing those complexities of human connection
Yeah.
and how loss impacts us.
And finally, we have Clarity, which delves into self-discovery and introspection.
Yeah.
The line, "I need me," speaks volumes
Yeah.
about recognizing the importance of self-care and prioritizing your own needs.
I think that's something we can all relate to, especially in today's world,
Yeah.
where it's so easy to get caught up in external pressures and forget to tune into ourselves.
It's a reminder to prioritize self-reflection and listen to our own inner voices.
So far, we've explored a lot of heavy stuff.
Yeah.
The struggles,
Mhm.
the isolation,
Yeah.
the search for meaning.
Yeah.
But there's this raw beauty and honesty that shines through.
It's what makes it so compelling. He doesn't shy away from difficult emotions, but uses them as fuel for his art.
It's like he's inviting us to confront those emotions alongside him
Yeah.
and find beauty in the brokenness.
Mm-hmm. It's how he uses music as this raw, unfiltered form of self-expression. It really challenges our assumptions about what art should be.
Right.
You know?
Here's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
We often think of art as polished and perfect,
Right.
but Carnage 1nOnly's music, it's so immediate.
Yeah.
Almost like we're experiencing these emotions alongside him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that rawness makes his music more relatable?
Absolutely. By
Yeah.
embracing that vulnerability, that imperfection,
Yeah.
he creates something truly authentic and powerful.
It definitely makes you think about what we consider good art, you know?
Yeah.
Are we too quick to dismiss something just because it's not perfectly polished?
Right.
Maybe true art is about connecting on a deeper level.
I think so. Carnage 1nOnly's music